Welcome everyone to recap part number 4 for the holy story from Rabbi Nachman of the Lost Princess and the book from Rabbi Yaakov Klein of the story of our lives. And we are beginning today with chapter 14. And chapter 14 and chapter 15 is the huge chapter that is many pages. So probably today we'll do chapter 14 and 15 and then finish off with one more recap session after this. There'll be a 5 recap session recap. So hope everyone's well, and let's get right into it. So the story continues. Many troops passed with a procession and equipment that accompanied them. The servant hid himself because of the soldiers. After the troops passed, a chariot and covered wagon approached. In it sat the princess. The procession stopped nearby. The princess descended and sat next to the viceroy. She recognized him. She shook him very much, but he did not wake. Okay, so we know that the viceroy messed up a second time. And this time he was asleep for a lifetime. He was asleep for 70 years. And now the princess is coming by with her entire entourage and she tries to wake him up. And he won't wake up. So let's see what we can pull out of this chapter. We're on page 227. So we see that he starts off by saying the Breslov Mashmiim teach that this is all the Yetzer Hara truly has: pomp and ceremony. The desires of this world are so transient, they have no real influence over a thinking person. Lesson number 1. All of these things that the Yetzer Hara tries to tell us that we want and that we need, if we ever attain them, we realize very quickly that they're false and that they're light as air and that they provide us with nothing. If it's a physical pleasure that we indulge in, that we don't want to, we realize very quickly that pleasure lasts only for a few seconds and it's gone. Sometimes it has to do with people. Sometimes it's people, right? Sometimes we see, I want to be connected to this certain person. This person has what I need. This person I see has something that is going to be good for me that I can't get anywhere else. And what happens? We end up getting to know that person a little bit more, and we realize that there's nothing there. I'm talking about someone who's not really not good for us, but the ways of the world have made us think that they are good for us, right? It can be a tremendous mistake, and we see that it's really nothing, right? So this is where this is the first point that he wants to make. The Yetzer Hara, the parade that the princess is being led through is soldiers and equipment and horses and carriages and everything. It's all a big show. But when it comes down to it, it's nothing. Moments spent learning together deep concepts from Rabbi Nachman, the beauty of a Shabbos meal, of a tefillah, the beauty of experiencing a recognition of the Creator in nature. These things stay with us and are powerful. It's those those things that the Yetzer Hara tells us are going to be great and amazing, but really when it comes down to it, they're worthless and they don't give us anything. And in fact, they do the opposite. They often pull us down. But Baruch Hashem, they also teach us a lesson when we come through them. Okay. So that's the first lesson of this chapter 14. The second lesson is like this. It's a very, very important lesson, starting on page 228. So we find ourselves falling into the traps of the Yetzer Hara. Okay, we know it's pomp and circumstance, but it pulls us in, and we fall into it. And what happens? He says midway through the page, be it as a result of physical desires, fear, financial stress, sadness, confusion, or the myriad of responsibles of daily life, we have become detached from the foundations of our existence. We end up, from all of this stuff, from having to deal with trying to navigate the world these days, with business. How am I making money, and what's happening, and what's with the markets and the shipping and the supply chains and everything. When it comes to children nowadays, our children are facing things that they've never faced in the past. Crazy things in the world, and we have to somehow guide them through it and help them along through all these weird things that didn't exist in the past, right? And prices of groceries, and our time is, we're so busy, we have no time for anything. We fall asleep. We can't serve Hashem. We can't do things of importance. We can't put our heart into things. We're asleep. We're spiritually asleep. Hopefully we're not. Hopefully if we're studying this book together, we're awake, or at least we're trying to be awake. We have our alarm set. and so we find ourselves in this situation. So what do? So Rabbi Nachman says something very important. When we find ourselves being cast into such a pit, when we find ourselves being overwhelmed by Olam Hazeh, by this world, and all of the stresses that come along with it, to the extent where we're falling asleep and we're not spiritually awake, it's not the time for intellectual stimulation. This is not what we need at this time. So someone might think, oh, you know why this is happening to me? Because I'm not really, I'm not studying enough halacha. I have to intellectually think about it. Maybe if I read a philosophy book, I'll understand more intellectually. Right? Rabbi Nachman is telling us like this. Of course, lest anyone say, we have to study halacha every single day. So it's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Right? What I am saying is that sometimes that's not what we need. And what we need is just to go back to a heartfelt emunah connection to Hashem. We just have to pare things down to absolute simplicity and just go straight back to Hashem. So he says over here, the powers of intellect must temporarily cease and give way to pure, unadulterated emunah, simple faith. The Yetzer Hara is a consummate academic, roots in the forces of Amalek, a power Rabbi Nachman equates with the cool, rational heresies of secular thought. Right? Meaning, sometimes we're just not in the space to have an intellectual battle with the Satan, with the Yetzer Hara, with the world, whatever it is. And it's not going to do it for us, and it's not going to be positive. So what do we do at this time? He says, emunah, however, is beyond his reach. Emunah is something that goes much beyond all of this type of thought. You know what happens? We see like many people, at least in the previous generation, they became Balei Tshuva. They became religious Jews from secular society. And many people did it by being turned on to a very intellectual new understanding that they didn't experience before. And they saw, oh, wait a second, there's something very deep here. The Torah and halacha and everything, and they saw different proofs about, the divinity of the Torah and the Bible codes and all these amazing things in Megillas Esther and all these things, and philosophically the argument that it makes sense that there's a God. And they went through all these intellectual ways of understanding and being turned on to Judaism. And it was good. But sometimes we reach a point in our lives where the intellect is not what needs to be nurtured anymore. Where we don't care. And we're being beaten down so much that it's time to turn to something more basic and more fundamental. And that's the power of emunah. So he says over here down at the bottom of 229, in such a situation, one must scream to our Father in heaven with a powerful scream from the depths of one's heart. Hashem will then hear his voice and turn toward his cry. It is possible that this itself will cause the failure and nullification of all his questions and obstacles. It's hard nowadays also. I have a friend, Baruch Hashem, a special friend, but this friend is very interested and has come on a long path and has been a very religious person, a religious Jewish person. But this person wavers a lot. and he gets caught up in a lot of different, what Rabbi Nachman calls chachmas chitzonius, philosophy, other types of religions. What? External, yeah, external wisdoms, right? And he's a special person, but he goes through stages where he gets mamish torn away. Baruch Hashem, this person always comes back and has some kind of grounding, right? But we see it's very, there's new things in science and in technology and in motivation and in psychology nowadays. It's very easy to be pulled down many different directions. And often, like the same thing we said, when we get pulled and we go down all these different directions, we find ourselves in a place where we're just in the midst of the pomp and circumstance, and we have nothing powerful to hold on to. Right? So this is the famous Torah of Rabbi Nachman called Aye, which we've never learned in our Likutei Moharan Chabura yet, but in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll get there. It's in the second section. We should maybe take a break and learn that Torah at some point. But he says over there, this concept, we say in Kedusha on Shabbos, Aye Mekoim Kavoidoi. Where is the place of Hashem's kavod? Kavod is secret Kabbalistic word for the sphere of Keser. Rabbi Nachman explains over there that we can find ourselves in a situation where, because of our choices and because of our actions and the things we do, we kick Hashem out of our lives. Right? We can't do that completely, but just listen for a second. Hopefully, we'll understand. Meaning, the divine presence, the tangible connection to Hashem that we want to feel, is not gonna be there if we have a ham sandwich in our hand. Obviously, right? Make sense? So we do things in our lives, and we make bad decisions, and we say, and the divine presence says, "Okay, I see where you're going. Okay, you're going to go there. You made the decision, but I can't go with you." And so first, we kick the sphere of Malchus out. And then we go a little bit deeper, and we kick the sphere of Hoyd out, and Netzach, and Gevura, and Chesed, and Tiferes, and we go all the way up. And we kick all of those emanations of Hashem out of our lives, from the decisions that we make and the things that we do, until we have nothing left. And we look around, and Rabbi Nachman says, at that point, there's only one thing we can do, and that is to scream out to Hashem, "Where are you?" I am Mekoim Kavoidai, but Kavoidai is secret Kabbalistic code for the Surah of Keser, the highest Surah. Because that's the Surah that never goes. It's always there, no matter what. And the Surah that's always there is the highest Surah of all. And it's when we find ourselves in that low place, and at that moment we scream out to the highest part of Hashem, that Hashem takes us and lifts us up out of that place into a place that we never would have gotten before. Right? But we have to really do it. But that's what he's saying over here. Sometimes everything is a jumble, everything's a mess. And at that moment, we have to go out and scream to Hashem. And that's all we can do. Chaim. I've experienced this a few times in my life, where things were going crazy and mamash falling apart, and I just I ran. I got in my car and I drove out to the middle of nowhere and ran out into the middle of nature somewhere where there's no one around, and I screamed at the top of my lungs to Hashem. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much Gemara and Shulchan Aruch you know. Doesn't matter how much philosophizing you've done, or how many intellectual paths you've woven, right? Sometimes you just need that base, and so this is what it means that the viceroy was asleep, right? All of that power is asleep, and you just have to. So he's hiding. That's where he found himself. So. Yeah, he says another beautiful idea over here, and that is that this page 230. The essence of Jewish religious thinking does not lie in entertaining a concept of God, but in the ability to articulate a memory of moments of illumination by His presence. Am Yisrael is not a people of definers, but a people of witnesses. What is he saying? He's saying that it's not always about using our intellect to define and to understand. What does it mean to be a witness? It means I experienced something. I felt something. There's something deeper that goes on within me. And that's referring to the relationship that I have with Hashem. For so long, many people have, this is going to be what the next chapter is all about. People have thought of Judaism as just a something that's learned intellect, just facts. So it's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be a relationship with Hashem. And when my connection to Hashem is all my memories of the times that I've connected, is all of my experiences where I've connected to Hashem. I've had this relationship, a people of witnesses rather than a people of definers. You hear? Very powerful statement. We're not robots. We're souls, and our souls are supposed to connect. The Torah of Rav Itchamar Morgenstern and B'yom Darkecha, we're learning now Shabbos morning over here. K'ma'at, the whole entire Sefer on Shabbos is all discussing about how we are supposed to feel and experience the light of Hashem on Shabbos. And if we don't, we're doing it wrong. And it's easy, and we can all do it. This is the kind of Torah that's coming out nowadays from the big tzaddikim. We're supposed to feel it. That's what we're saying. Okay. Yeah, you guys on the same page as me? Yeah? All right. Yeah. So another important aspect is that we have to know, though, when we find ourselves in these places where we're in a low place, that listen to these words. And these words, Rabbi Nachman is reinforcing the notion that wherever the troops of impurity and concealment are found, one can discover the lost princes of holiness from deep beneath the rubble, if he is only wise enough to search. Meaning, like we've said so many times, right? It's coming up again. From that low place, chas v'sholom, should we ever think that it's a failure, that everything's ruined, that I'm the worst person because I destroyed everything? No. We're going to look and we're going to find in that place is taka where we're going to be able to grow and come close to Hashem. Namish. Tremendous chizuk. So this is the way that the princess sees it. So he wakes up and he says, what's happening here when he wakes up? Where am I? How did I get here? Right? I ruined everything. But the princess doesn't say it like that. She sees him there, and we might think that when she sees him and what she says, that she's talking about how he failed. He says the opposite. No. She, from that place, she still believes in him, and she's still talking to him, and she's still trying to get him to move on, trying to wake him up. Why? Because she sees that he sees tremendous hope and potential, and he's going to make it. She knows he's going to make it. That's why the princess wakes him up. This, in other words, this is the princess way of thinking. Right? Is in that place, wake up. Come on, you can do this. It's going to happen. It's going to be okay. You're going to make it. Not to wake up and look around and say, okay, that's it. I ruined everything. I'm giving up. As we know, Rabbi Nachman says, we never, ever give up. So he says like this, with these words, the Holy Rebbe is speaking to our souls. Don't think that after you have fallen these 2 times and deserted the Shekhinah, that they no longer recognize you above. On the contrary, the Shekhinah descends to you, recognizes you. They still take tremendous pride in you above. When you think you're low, that's not what Hashem thinks. Hashem says, hey, you messed up, no problem. Come on, get up. You can do this. I still see you. You're still holy. You can still make it happen. So the Shekhinah comes down and shakes him and tries to wake him up. The second point is that we didn't say over here, but I remember from last time, that's so awesome, is that you see this time around, he doesn't even wake himself up. The Shekhinah tries to wake him up. Right? He needs that spiritual awakening that he's going to experience. We've talked about this before, that many of us here have had such an experience where we felt like we were woken up by something else. Something's happened to us, and we feel like someone's saying, okay, I have something for you. I want to illuminate your intellect. I want to illuminate your soul, and I have a path for you. Right? We experience this. The Shekhinah, when we see desolation, the Shekhinah sees potential. When we see failure, the Shekhinah seems a tremendous lesson to move forward. Right? It's like we always say, the difference between the lashon of galus and geula. When we see being buried, the Shekhinah sees us being planted. It's all the same idea. And that moves us to chapter 15. Ready? This chapter, if we had to put a title to this chapter, he did put a title, but I'm saying a different title. This title would be the absolute necessity of Panemius HaTorah, of the deep hidden Torah, the necessity of it. Okay, we'll see why. The story goes like this in chapter 15. She began to bemoan, how many immense difficulties and toils he has undergone for so many years in order to free me. And on the day he could have freed me, he lost everything. She began to cry greatly over all of this, saying, for there is great pity upon him and upon me, for I have been held captive here for so long, and I am unable to leave. She then took the scarf from her head and wrote on it with her tears. She placed it next to him. She went and sat in her chariot, and they traveled on. Okay, let's get going. One thing to point out, we learned last time around also, is that it looks like this is the biggest point of failure, right? But what do we see? We see that the princess is on her way already. And we don't know at this point, but she's on her way to the Golden Palace. Right? Meaning what? How did she get out? She was supposed to be trapped there. She was supposed to be stuck there. He was supposed to free her. She's going already. What's going on? He doesn't even realize it. He thinks he fell asleep and ruined everything. But what he doesn't realize is that the 2 full years of effort and toil and longing and desiring that he put in, that actually accomplished something. What did it accomplish? She's on her way. She's out of the palace. She's moving, right? Another absolute perfect example of the difference of the way a person might think compared to the Shekhinah. The difference of galus versus geula. Galus says, I wasted 2 years and I accomplished nothing. And now I've had my biggest failure ever. And the Shekhinah says, what are you talking about? Those 2 years freed me from the palace of evil. And I'm on my way now to the Golden Palace. You just got to get up and finish the job. That's it. Very, very, very important point. Okay. So this is what he says, the beginning of this chapter. And the princess doesn't mean to berate him, and she's trying to do the opposite. Instead, the viceroy needs to be reminded of everything he has done right in the effort to free her. There's times when we think that we're failing and we're not. We set goals for ourselves and we don't reach them. Or something that I know at least some of us are used to is that we find ourselves falling and quote unquote failing in the same things that we've been working on that we thought we were past, right? And we think, I haven't done anything over these years. Nothing's happened. What's going on, right? He says, no. That's not at all what's going on. The princess is moving because of you, right? So this is the concept that he brings from Rav Kook over here of Gaiva de Kedusha, holy pride. We have to have holy pride. Arrogance, we know, is one of the worst traits a person can have, and it can ruin lives. However, it has a positive outlet, and that is this aspect of a person being able to look at themselves and taking some pride in a holy way, not in an arrogant way, to give them strength and energy to continue on their journey. To say, I'm doing something, things are happening. I have the ability to do these things. I can help people, I can help myself, I can grow, I can learn, right? It's so important. Just as regret in the heart of man is a positive thing, encouragement is also absolutely essential, so as to allow him to serve Hashem in Torah and Avodah with a clear mind. The princess of holy passion never ever gives up on any Jew. We always have to be looking for the Nekuda Tova in ourselves. Now, everybody knows, I say this probably at least once a month, that the most important Torah in all of the Likutei Moharan, said Rabbi Nachman, is Torah Reish Pei Beis 282, which is called a Zamra, which tells us that a person must always look at everyone around them and find the good points in the people around them. And just by looking at another person and seeing their nekudas tovos, their good points, you actually activate the good in that person. You're looking at a person and choosing to see the good in them. Actually, his lashon is v'yachol lahachziro b'tshuva through this. Right? You see in Kabbalah that the gaze has tremendous power. The way we gaze at someone, it has an effect on that person. And so Rabbi Nachman says something after this that is one of the most important things, in my opinion, for our generation right now. And he says, more important than looking at everyone else and finding their good points is a person has to look inward and find their own nekudas tovos, their own good points. And always look for their good points. And by doing this, we can fan those flames of good in ourselves. You know, anyone who focuses on negative, I don't know if we talk about this sometimes. If you know someone who focuses on the negative a lot, it's just a downward spiral of negativity and pain and disappointment and suffering, non-stop suffering. And that's without the amazing spiritual effect that it has on a person. Just in regular non-spiritual ways, if you focus on the positive and you look for the good in yourself and in other people, you're going to be happier. You're going to see good and you're going to see the world in a different way. Rabbi Nachman tells us even further that when you look at someone and when you look at yourself, when you look at another person, you actually light them up. You cause them to change by seeing the positive in them. So important and so powerful. It's one of the things where very important aspect in parenting also. Ooh, this is a hard one. This is a tough one. If parents often have it in their nature that I have to tell my kids what's wrong with them. And why did you do this? Why did you always do this? You always do that. Can't you ever do this? Can't you ever do that? Right? We're always trying to focus on the because we think it's true. We think we have to teach them and we have to mold them and shape them. And we do play a part in that, right? But if we don't focus on their positive sides, and we don't look at the good things that they do and remind them of them, but certainly even if we have to give them a little bit of teichacha now and then, even if we have to show some midas hadin to them, some judgment to them, in our parenting efforts, we have to make sure that when we're doing that, it's coming from a place of seeing the greatness of them. And that the second after we say that, we're looking and seeing the good in them and all their good points. And if you don't do that, you do not have emunah in Hashem. Right? It's all ego. If I think that I have to tell them what's wrong with them, and it's only if I berate them and I correct all their mistakes and I show them what's wrong, then they're going to be okay. That's making me God. Right? We have to remember, just me showing them love, looking at them with positivity, looking at everything they do and trying to find the good things, that is going to have a tremendous effect on them. That's going to wake up the good in them. Right? I'm not saying don't have any discipline. Right? But that's usually not what we have to say. But together with that, light up their neshama. Put your holy gaze onto the good points of that person and light them up. Okay, I'm speaking too much about this. We're never going to get through this book. All right. So, anyway, point. You got my point, guys? Yeah? Okay. All right. Next point, awesome. So what does she do? What does the princess do? She can't wake him up. He won't wake up. So she takes a headscarf and writes a message onto the headscarf with her tears. And she leaves it for him. And then he's going to wake up. Okay, he doesn't wake up yet in this chapter. But so what's going on here? What's the idea of this headscarf? This is the main point of this chapter. Why a scarf? Why a headscarf? A headscarf refers to the moyach, the brain. We say that the brain is the seat of the neshama. And that's the place where we're able to internalize, to bring in all of the deepest aspects of Torah. And it's written in a way that it's hidden. It's referring to the hidden aspects of Torah, the deepest part of Torah, the Pnimius HaTorah. When we say Pnimius HaTorah, we're referring to Kabbalah, we're referring to Chassidus, we're referring to the Torah of the Sephardic tradition that is really, it's kind of the same thing as Chassidus, but the Sephardim wrote it. It's taking ideas of Kabbalah and Pnimius HaTorah and writing them, the Ben Ish Chai. Oh, amazing. Putting it into a sort of practical way that we can understand. Absolutely amazing. We're talking about the Torah of the Vilna Gaon and some of his disciples and Pnimius HaTorah. So she's telling him, this is my message for you. This is what you need. And it's, why is it it's a garment? Why is it a garment? So I came up with a good mashal this week in a different class to explain the concept of a garment. What the Torah, the tzaddikim take the Pnimius HaTorah, this deep, amazing Torah, and they turn it into a garment. So what does a garment mean? What does a garment do? A garment is something that allows you to see something on the outside of a person. Right? So my mashal, I think everyone over here is over probably 30, right? Yeah, okay. So, do you remember there was a movie back in the day? I think there was an original version of it, like way back, maybe in the 50s or 60s. And then there was another one, maybe a little later. And I think recently there was a new version of it called The Invisible Man. Yeah? Everybody remembers? Invisible Man was an invisible man. And so what did he do so people could see him, if he wanted people to see him? He put on like clothing and like a trench coat and a hat, and he wrapped around like a mummy style kind of towel around his face and put like sunglasses on so people could see him. Why? Because if he didn't have that garment on, you wouldn't be able to see him. This is a great way to understand the concept of Pnimius HaTorah, the light of Hashem, and the Torah of the tzaddikim. It's ki'ilu, the light of Hashem is always shining. But if we don't have the right eyes for it, we're not able to see it. The tzaddikim can see it. So what do? They take it and they put a garment around it so that we can see it with our own eyes. They can show us the shape of it. They can show us to a certain extent what it is. Just like that garment of the invisible man, Lavdil, right? And this is why when we learn the Torah of Rabbi Nachman, the fact that we're learning for so many months, the deepest ideas probably that we ever learned together, in the form of a fable, a simple story for children, is possibly, in my opinion, the best example of this garment that he's talking about in the story. It's like the garment in the story is talking about the story itself. Yeah, this is what it is. All this months and hours and hours and hours. We're now up to I think this is our 30th shir on this fable. That's 30 hours that we've been together discussing these deep ideas and what it's a story. This is the garment, and through that garment, we are able to uncover all of this amazing depth. And if he didn't give us that garment, if he didn't put that clothing around the invisible kedusha, let's call it, right? We never would have seen it. We wouldn't even have known it existed. This is the garment. This is the idea, and the message that Rabbi Klein is trying to get across in this chapter, over and over again with many different examples, is that now, in our times, in this generation, we need this Torah. We cannot be satiated with the Torah of generations ago. The continued revelation of this deeper level of Torah is absolutely necessary for us. So let's go on and let's see how this comes out. We see also, by the way, what's one of the deepest relationships that we can have person to person in this world is, of course, the relationship of a husband and wife. A very deep, intimate, close relationship, right? So it's also no accident that it's a headscarf that is used as the metaphor over here. The headscarf is what we see. Two places we see it in Jewish tradition, but one is by a chasana, by a wedding, right? What happens is when we're about to enter into this incredibly intimate union, right? So the veil is put over the wife. The headscarf is put on top of the wife. It has a very strong connection to a very deep, intimate relationship. So too, we see by the sota. If anybody knows the story of the sota, it's a very misunderstood aspect of the Torah, where if there's a husband and wife that I'm going to give my version of it, okay? Okay? My version of it is it's a husband and wife that are going through some difficult times, and probably things were said, and the relationship became stressed, and there was mistrust. And so what happens is the husband says, I don't want to see you going to be alone with this other man. Don't do it. And she is presumed to be alone with this other man. And so there's a whole procedure where she goes to the temple, the Beis HaMikdash, and she has to, swear that she didn't do it or whatever, and drink this water. And what happens at the end of that is that, assuming that she was faithful, and it was all just a huge misunderstanding, like most things are, is that she becomes pregnant, and they come back together, and they bring a new life into the world through this whole thing. In other words, through that whole situation of negativity and mistrust and misunderstanding, in the end, they come out closer, and they come out with a new existence that comes from the two of them in the world. A new soul is brought into the world through this, right? But what happens over there when she goes to the temple is she has to remove her headscarf. And the way that I like to see it is that it's right at this point where the relationship is at that point, like everything we talk about. It's at that low point, but it's that point where it's going to now go to the highest place it could ever be, right? At that point is where the Torah brings in the concept of a headscarf. Once again, it's connected to this idea of a completely deep, intimate connection between two people. That's what the Pnimis Torah is. It's the thing that's a deep, intimate connection between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu. With me? Yeah? Okay. Good. So he says like this: we need the tzaddikim. We need their Torah. That's what we need. He goes on to explain that this concept that there was a revelation, the first big revelation of the Kabbalistic world came from Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the writing of the Zohar HaKadosh, right? The Zohar. That was in the time of the Tanaim, way back when, like close to 2,000 years ago. And then there was another revelation after that by the Arizal in like the 1500s. And then after that, some of his students, and then the Baal Shem Tov in the 1700s. And then all the other Hasidic masters and Rabbi Nachman in like the late 1700s, 1800s. And there's a continual revelation, more and more being revealed as time goes on. And there's a concept that he brings later on, but a universal concept that everybody always talks about and knows, that's called Yeridas Hadoros. That means that from the time of Har Sinai, of the receiving of the Torah, it keeps diminishing. The Torah keeps diminishing. Our understanding of halacha and the Gemara and the oral law and everything, and it gets diminished the farther we get away from there, because the light was so bright in there. Everything was given over to Moshe Rabbeinu, and he gave everything over to us. But as the years go by, we get farther away from that. With Pnimis Torah, it's the opposite. The farther we go into history, the more and more gets revealed. He brings that in the name of Rav Tzadok HaKohen a little bit later on in here. Why? Because as we come closer to the end and closer to Mashiach, that's when we get to the time when we need this Torah. We can't live without it. That's why it went into the Baal Shem Tov, and then the Hasidic movement, and Kabbalah is becoming more and more revealed, and Hasidus is becoming more and more revealed, and we need it now. We're not ready to accept anything less. So many good points over here. He says, let me just find it here for a second. 1 second. Sorry. Yeah. If you go to page 250, he begins a long explanation of the fact that it used to be that it was not permitted to study these things. So in the old days, let's say 1,000 years ago, this was the type of Torah that was only able to be transmitted from one person to another. And it was always hidden. It was always hidden. Many reasons are given for this. One of the most amazing that I heard recently from Rabbi Weinberger is that people were so much more connected to in a more open way to Hashem. There are miracles still happening, there's prophecy, all these things that were going on, that being able to go into, in the way that he explains it, being able to go into the treasure house of the king, right in there, and to be able to access all of that was very powerful in the hands of those people, right? But by us, in our generation, we're so far away from that. We're so buried in Tumah, and we're so buried in like everything that's going on out there, that we need whatever we can get from it, right? That light, we're so far away from it, we're not going to destroy anything anymore with it, right? We're not going to mess anything up. But we need whatever we need it. We just need the light to shine on us, right? I got to think of a new mashal for this. Yeah, there's got to be a good one. So anyway, it used to be that it was only transmitted one person, and after the disaster of Shabbat Tzvi, this false Messiah, and he brought thousands and thousands of people to convert out of Judaism, to do terrible things. Many people were killed. It was a huge disaster, which I've heard people say was the biggest disaster that ever happened to the Jewish people, because after that, a gigantic portion of the Jewish people said, okay, you know what? Kabbalah is not allowed anymore. Pnimis Torah is not allowed anymore. They switched the lights off. They said it's too dangerous. And so in many communities, and for a long time, and in all communities really, it was shut off until the Baal Shem Tov came around and started to reveal it. And like the Ben Ish Chai also started to reveal these things in a way that the people were ready for, and in a way that what was needed could be taken from it. And so, all of the Kabbalah of the Arizal is written down by Rav Chaim Vital, who was the main student of the Arizal. And he himself, he's quoted here in a few places. Let me give a few quotes. This, by the way, the title of this portion of the shir is "Permission to Learn Pnimis Torah." Okay, so he says like this. Listen to this. Rav Kook held the requirement of holding off on studying deeper teachings until one has filled his belly with Shas and Poskim, that's the revealed Torah, has lessened in our generation, said Rav Kook. He says like this. More Rav Kook. The revelation of this wisdom in the final generations, lowly and corrupt, is for the purpose of providing a shield, so that one may hold firm to our Father in heaven with a complete heart. Again, Rav Kook. However, one who feels in his heart a desire and yearning to study these deep matters, to delve into Hashem's truth, this falls into the category of a person who only studies Torah in the place where his heart desires. That's a Talmudic dictum. Ein adam lilmoid el b'makom shel liv bo chafetz ba. That's what a person has to study. Such a person, these studies are considered their meat and wine, meaning this is the basics that a person needs. Other tzaddikim who understood this, the Bnei Yisachar, Rav Yitzchak Isaac of Komarna, they held that this requirement does not apply in our generations at all. What's the requirement? That you first have to learn all of Shas and Poskim, all the revealed Torah. Then you can learn Kabbalah. They said this does not apply anymore whatsoever. Right? In addition, it's known from many of the tzaddikim that the requirement with regard to Kabbalistic concepts brought in the works of the Hasidic masters, no requirements apply at all. Meaning, those ideas have, when it comes to the Hasidic teachings, it has nothing to do with it whatsoever. So you see, many of the big tzaddikim are showing us and telling us that that this not only are we allowed to learn this Torah, but it's necessary for us. Do I need to say? I should say. Okay, I should say. That doesn't mean that people should dive in deeply into the books of pure Kabbalah. That requires some help and some guidance, and you have to be ready for it. So I'm not saying that, but for sure, for the Kabbalah that's brought in Hasidus, we see it's a necessity. It has to. We have to have it, and we're allowed to have it. And other simple Kabbalah books, same thing. We in this generation we need it. Okay. So he says like this also, that there's going to be he calls it holy insolence. There's going to be insolence in the generation preceding Mashiach coming, where people are going to be demanding that the what's been up till now is not good enough. We can't accept it anymore. It's because the souls that are going to be around in these times are begging and are needing truth and are needing a deep connection, and we have to have it through this Torah. And he says over here, this is also Rav Kook, it is vital for the spiritual element of the Torah in all its expanses, depth, and reach to have a place in our yeshivas, right? And guess what? It's still not there. It's still not there. He said this already 100 years ago. It's still not there. He says it's gonna stop. It's gonna cure all the problems in Eretz Yisrael if we would have this Torah. And yeah, he brings from Rav Tzadok Cohen over here. He said he brings an important point that in the yeshiva system, you see that there's many young people who don't make it in the yeshiva system, and they fail out, they flunk out, what they say, they fry out, right? And they don't do well in this class, they don't do well in this class, and they get bounced from this yeshiva to that yeshiva to this yeshiva, and what do they end up like on the street? They end up doing drugs, they end up doing this and doing that, right? And why? Listen to this. How many children who fail out of our schools and fall out of touch with Yiddishkeit do so not out of rebellion or theological crisis, but simply because the greatness of their souls compels them to thirst for a level of Torah that is unavailable to them. If you make a box and you say every single person has to fit into this box, every single person has to learn this exact Torah, every single person has to learn it in the exact same way, and you try to shove everybody in there, some people aren't going to fit. And some people are going to get hurt and injured as you're trying to shove them in there. The Gemara itself says this. Ein adam, we just said it. Ein adam loimed el b'makom shel libo chavetz ba. A person has to find the Torah that their heart desires, that their heart connects to, and study that Torah. And it has to be okay to do that. But it's not like that. It's still not like that for the most part. In 99% of all yeshivas. And so the main point that he's making over here, by the way, is that it's very often that it's those souls that are actually much higher. This is a big thing in Rav Kook. Actually, Batzal Noar just came out with an entire book explaining this concept. I just saw it recently. This concept. It's called Neshamas de Tohu. The souls from the, I don't know how to translate Tohu, whatever. but it's these souls that they're actually much higher level souls, but they don't fit into things. They don't fit into the schedule. They're not great with time. They're not great with scheduling. They're not great with just following the same order that everyone else follows. But really their souls are much, much higher. It seems to be that the tikkun is for everybody, is that those souls need to have a little bit more tikkun in their they need a little more structure, a little more schedule. And then there's the other people who are super structured and scheduled and unrelenting, right? Those people need to lighten up a bit and need to be a little more tohudik and go into those realms of chaos. So it's chaos, the souls of chaos, souls of the world of chaos. Somewhere in the middle, there's the right balance, but we don't give them the opportunity. They just get cast aside in such a system. What if they were able to come and say, oh, you know what, this isn't working for you. Why don't we try to learn some Rabbi Nachman? See where it takes us. Why don't we try to learn some Lubavitch Chassidus? See where it takes us. Right? Oh, you don't like this? Let's just learn some simple halacha. Maybe you'll connect to that. But no, everyone has to sit and do the same thing in the exact same way, and there's casualties. Who can say how much pain might have been averted had we only broadened our definition of Limud Torah to include the entirety of our Holy Torah given on Har Sinai, instead of reserving validation and respect for a hyper-specific method of Torah study? Oy vavoy. There's so many great quotes here. I'm just going to say them. How many people and apathetic people returned to our communities a few years down the line with the works of Chassidus, Midrash, Agada, Ramchal, Breslov, and Chabad tucked lovingly under their arm. They found something that pulled them back. Okay, Rav Chaim of Volozhin. Volozhin is the yeshiva that's kind of the root of the entire yeshiva system. Right? Rav Chaim of Volozhiner was the Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, and he sort of is considered kind of to be the establisher, Rav Chaim Volozhiner, of this type of learning and the yeshiva system. Right? This is a quote from him. Okay, you with me? The guy who started the whole system that I'm talking about. This is a quote from him. And even if he busies himself with words of Agada, which hold no practical application to any law, he is also bound to the speech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For the entirety of Torah, in general and in all of its particularity and nuance, was uttered by the mouth of Hashem to Moshe on Har Sinai. And therefore, the holiness of the entirety of Torah is absolutely equal, without any difference or change at all. You hear that? That's from Nefesh HaChaim. So, coming out from that, in the next section, he says, so you know what we need? We need balance. We need balance. We have to learn Talmud. We have to learn Halacha. But you know what? We really have to learn Chassidus also. And we have to have some light. We need some Kabbalah. We need some Chassidus. We need depth. We need connection in all of these things. And the next statement that he makes is that people are afraid that what's going to be if we start learning all this stuff, then no one's going to learn Talmud anymore, and all that great Talmudic learning is going to be down the drain. And he says that's absolutely not the way it goes. What do you see when somebody learns Pnimis HaTorah and gets lit up? It illuminates that learning for them also. They're able to study Talmud, to study Halacha in a way that it all comes out in an incredible way. Okay, good. Also, he says it's the Torah of Eretz Yisrael is this type of Torah, and the Torah of Chutz La'aretz is more of the practical Torah. And you can see how the way they spoke about the Torah. For example, David HaMelech called the Torah a song. Rava, who was one of the Amoraim, I think, in Bavel, in Babylon, so outside of Eretz Yisrael, he held that's what David HaMelech was punished for calling the Torah a song. But the Amoraim who were in Eretz Yisrael, where it's this different, more holy plane, they had no problem with this whatsoever. They held, of course, you could refer to the Torah as a song, because they were more open to this. So he says, we see that in the, as we get into these last generations, we see that Eretz Yisrael is being reestablished, the center of Pnimis HaTorah is being reestablished, and the Pnimis HaTorah is flowing out in a much greater rate. It's like the Tikkun. This is like this. The way it's going to happen is happening in front of our eyes with the reestablishment of Eretz Yisrael. He says the importance of tefillah also. When we get into learning, and we have to understand that the prayer, connecting to Hashem with our words and expressing ourselves to Hashem, is also in the last generation. He says in the last generation before the coming of Mashiach, the primary focus in our avodas Hashem must be fixed upon tefillah, prayer. Tefillah is where we allow our soul to express her faith in the spiritual realm, to strengthen her bond with Hashem in a conscious manner. Right? He brings on page 261 a beautiful, quick story. Once again about this. This is important. He says, imagine if you had a little boy who became 3 years old. What happens when a boy becomes 3 years old? He gets his first haircut, and he also gets his first pair of tzitzis. So you put him on this little pair of tzitzis, and they're so cute. They're like about that big, tiny little cute thing. Maybe there's a train on it. I don't know, right? You put it on him. Okay, good. So what if we said, okay, now you got your pair of tzitzis, you're set for life now. Now go to school. And he grows year by year, year by year, year by year. And we said, what? You got tzitzis already. Just keep wearing them. And he becomes a man. And now it looks like a bib, right? Everything's wearing off, and it's like dirty, and the tzitzis are frayed, right? But what? You have your tzitzis. That's it. Done. No. We would say, of course, it's so obvious. As you grow, you need something more. You need something more. And he says, this is from the mouth of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, by the way, one of the big Rosh Yeshivas, that this has to be what happens to a Jew in regards to their understanding of basic things like Shabbos and Yom Tov and mitzvahs. If we continue, I'm telling you, this is not a joke. Many people out there, a huge percentage of people, don't elevate their understanding of Shabbos and Yom Tov and mitzvahs and everything beyond a grade school level, even though they become, they become scholars, right? They become very important in the community, but they don't know anything about the depths behind these things, right? If we're not continuing to expand the depth of our understanding of these things as we get older, we're like a grown man wearing the same clothing that he was given when he was 3 years old. Doesn't make any sense, right? Okay, just about finished here. The Vilna Gaon said that Pnimis Torah provides something, puts a type of life force inside of us that the Yetzer Hara is not able to touch. The Yetzer Hara is not able to sway those that occupy themselves with the study of Remez and Sod. Said the Vilna Gaon. Remember, he's at the top of the system. A beautiful quote from Rav Shlomo Wolbe, who was the master of the Musar world also. He says that, I'll just read a little bit. Creation is extremely deep. History is extremely deep. But it is possible to live in the world in a simple manner. We walk on the ground without thinking about all that is hidden within its depths. We glance at the sky only to know whether to bring an umbrella. I love the sentence. We glance at the sky only to know whether to bring an umbrella without experiencing the awesome loftiness of the heavens. You can walk outside. Have you ever been outside in the nighttime, out in the middle of nowhere, out in the country? If you look up, it's a clear night. It's like it's something that a city dweller would not believe exists. What you see in the sky when you look up like this, the depths of it, you can see the actual galaxy of the Milky Way, and you can see millions and millions and millions of stars. It's like unbelievable, right? Imagine you were out there, and you walked outside and you looked up just to be like, oh, do I need to bring an umbrella with me? I don't need it. I kept walking. What? Look what's up there. Look at the incredible vastness of what we can see and the detail and the amazingness, right? That's like what's happening with Torah. It's like, oh, I just want to see. Do I have to have a metal sheet on top of that on Shabbos to cook or not? Okay, I have to know it. Just like I have to know if I need to bring an umbrella. But wait a second. What's Shabbos all about? Where does Shabbos come from? How is it dead? Why is it connected to Malchus? Why is it connected to the princess? Why is it connected to the Shekhinah? What's all the depth and the lights? Why do we have candles? And what's the extra revelation of the light of Hashem? And I have an extra soul on Shabbos and all these things. There's so much there. But if I just look to see if I need an umbrella, I'm missing the whole thing. Yep. Yeah. Wait. Okay, last point, and we'll finish here. At the very end, page 268, the last section of the chapter is called A Necessary Constriction. Okay, so we see that the viceroy is asleep. And she tries to wake him, but he doesn't wake up. why can't the divine presence, why can't the Shekhinah, why can't the princess wake him up? And she has to leave this note that is kind of invisible, and that he has to hold up to the light to see. He can't really access it right away. What's going on over here? So he says, this concept that, a Kabbalistic concept that translates as the concealment is the revelation. The concealment is the revelation. So meaning what? We all know that in order for creation to take place, there had to be first a total constriction. The light of Hashem was shining everywhere, but there had to be a tzimtzum, a total constriction. Everything had to be brought into darkness first in order for the ability for vessels to be created that could receive that light in the right measure. And if we didn't have those vessels, what would be? And we didn't have the darkness in those vessels, what would be? It would just be all Hashem, the light of Hashem, which is great, but that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants that we should be able to receive from Him. So, in order to do that, there has to be a tzimtzum. There has to be a constriction. There has to be a darkness. And then after that, we can begin to create vessels on our level, in our time, that we can receive that light from Hashem that fits to us. And if someone gives us a vessel that's too big, what's going to happen? It's going to be filled and it's going to explode. We have to fill our vessels in the right way for us. And so, the viceroy first, before he can go and get the princess, he has to go through a constriction first. He's not ready for that relationship yet. He has to go to sleep. He has to be out of it. And she has to leave him something that is not all of her light shining at once. It's not all the details. It's not everything clearly. He's not ready for that. It's not going to work for him. She leaves him something that he has to look at. He has to figure it out. He has to hold it up to the light and understand what it means to him. He needs the help of the tzaddikim. He needs the help of that garment. It needs to be in a garment. It can't be the direct light, the direct relationship. It has to be the garment that's covering over so that he can have that connection. So we have to know, all of us, that once again, it's the same concept in a different way. Is that sometimes it's when we hit those low points, it's not a low point. It's just a place where we're like Rabbi Nachman says so clearly, we're actually at the beginning of a new level. And at the beginning of that new level, we have to get rid of the darkness, get rid of the negative forces, and then we're going to be able to receive the light of that level. But we have to start off first with a tzimtzum. Everything happens with tzimtzum. Birth, right? Like we said, when you put a seed in the ground, what happens? It has to go dark. It has to decay. It has to look like it's about to die, and then it starts to grow. Right? When a baby is going to be born, it has to, this thing we talked about before, right before it's born, the mother's blood is cut off. It has no nutrients coming from its mother. It hasn't breathed yet. It has nothing. It's dead for a minute. That's a few seconds. Right? And then, right at that point, where it looks like it's the worst of the worst, and it's all over, that's the time when the baby opens his mouth and takes its first breath, and lets out that first cry, and everybody starts crying, and everyone's happy, because the baby's born. But right before that was disaster. Always has to be tzimtzum before there can be illumination. And that's where we find ourselves. The last point, he says, there's no such thing as falling out of serving Hashem. The question is not, can I serve Hashem in this situation? But how can I serve Hashem in this situation? We have to know, the last lesson of this chapter is to be a baki b'shoiv. Rabbi Nachman says in Torah Vav, Torah number 6, that a person has to be an expert when we're high, how to serve Hashem, and an expert when we're low, how to serve Hashem. And there's a different avodah for both of those things. So when we wake up and we find ourselves in a place of tzimtzum, in a place of, I could call it darkness, or in a place of pre-light, right? When I find myself buried in the ground as a seed, I have to know that it's not, is my life over? And can I serve Hashem? It's just, what do I do? How can I serve Hashem? How do I move forward? How do I do the right thing? Okay, so that's the end of chapter 15, chapter 14 and 15. And I believe that that the last few chapters are about as long as chapter 14 and 15. So Mirza Hashem, we'll have one more class recapping this. We'll finish it off, and we'll be ready to move on to our next book, which is going to be the Garden of Wisdom. Any questions, comments, things to share? Vered.
Sandra might have.
Did you guys hear that? Vered said that. Beautiful. She said that when we find ourselves in that situation and we're tempted to say I can't, right? It's not the right way to look at it. Vered says the right way to look at it is to say how can I? Instead of she didn't say this word, but instead of just wallowing in desolation, she did say this word. She said, I'm looking for the solution.
Right. So no pity party.
No pity party, says Vered. No pity party. I'm looking for the solution, whatever it might be.
Yep.
Wise words, Sandra. If I could add on to what you said, the first point, that sometimes you don't know what the solution is. I think very often what happens is, and what's important is at that point, we sometimes have to let go of what we have decided the solution is. And sometimes saying, what can I do, means letting go and saying, okay, what can I do may not be the thing that I thought I needed to do. Okay, but where's the path going to take me next? What can I do to try to get on board with Ratzon Hashem? Even if it may not be the thing that I thought was supposed to be for me. Right, to take me down a different path. And that sometimes takes, like Sandra's saying, not sometimes, it always takes contemplation and prayer and space sometimes to be ready for it. To say, okay, I'm done, I'm giving up. I've done this a few times in my life, and big changes, big points of change, where I just, okay, I guess maybe that's not where I'm supposed to go.
We're going to find a different...
You hear that, guys? We sometimes have to unlearn what we've learned in order to be able to... We're kind of now all saying the same thing, which is cool when that happens in different words.
Yeah.
We have to unlearn. We have to be willing to accept something that I didn't think of yet. I didn't think it was going to be this way. Right? I didn't actually... And what I thought was important maybe is not important. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah. But that's saying... That's saying, now what do I do? How can I be connected to Hashem now? Right? Beautiful, important.
I'm putting my hand up.
Okay. What do you got?
Please tell me what Tzimtzum is.
Tzimtzum means constriction. It means that the classic understanding of it is that in beginning of creation, the light of Hashem filled everything. And in order to make a place for creation to take place, he had to constrict, retract the light from that place and leave a place of darkness where creation could begin to take place within that. So it means that we face throughout our lives, through our aliyahs and yeridas, through our ups and downs, we always have to have a place of constriction. I like to use a word to describe tzimtzum and the darkness where creation takes place as like blank canvas. Right? We need to sometimes go through a tzimtzum, which doesn't feel good at the time necessarily, but what it does is it wipes things clean and gives me a blank canvas to now create and make vessels to receive from Hashem what I'm supposed to receive. Because sometimes I'm, like we said, I'm thinking too much. I'm making up too much of what I think things should be, and I end up filling all my vessels with garbage, and there's no room for Hashem. So sometimes Hashem says, okay, hold on. We got to have a correction here. It's time to wipe everything out, empty all the vessels, maybe even destroy the vessels, and make a blank canvas, a clean start where we can start fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That hit me. That hit home.
Okay, good. Baruch Hashem. All right, guys. Everybody have an awesome week. And Mirza Hashem, we'll see you all, some of you Wednesday, some of you Monday. Okay, bye-bye.